Hi, I'm Ryan Davis.
And I'm Kiernan Schmidt.
And this is Out of Office, a travel podcast.
To see taken.
Hey, Kiernan.
Hey, Ryan. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Oh, New England fall. I'm in heaven. This is my time. It's cold out. I've got a fleece on. The trees have turned. Thanksgiving's a week away. I'm great.
Are you also having Thanksgiving at a Hyatt?
Oh, so you're gonna do a sell? Well, gosh. So you're not coming home for Thanksgiving, is what I'm picking up.
No. I'm going with friends to the Grand Hyatt. I went last year too, and they do like a big traditional spread, and it's where all like the embassy people go, and
that sounds great. Hobnob with the embassy folks. Yeah, that sounds great.
Exactly. Yeah. So it'll be fun, and it's my one time to get turkey all year.
And this is the one time I eat turkey all year too. And I'm a fan of Hyatt. I think this sounds great.
Yeah, it's going to be fun.
Do they do anything wrong? Like, does the stuffing have like plantains in it or anything?
They definitely have like stuff you wouldn't have. Like they have like yucca like mash instead,
sure instead of mashed potatoes.
yeah so stuff like that.
Sure, that's fun.
Like I don't remember like avocado being prominently featured in my childhood Thanksgivings, but
Oh, it's very traditional. And
yeah.
this, I know, some of the people in our reviews they just catch up with each other too much. This is not just pure ketchup, people. That's because today's topic, it's a celebration of Thanksgiving and visiting. Yeah, everybody knows I'm Boston based. Just an hour away, Plymouth, Massachusetts is such a great town to visit. And we have a guest on who's an expert in not only Plymouth tourism more broadly, but specifically about the replica Mayflower that has been in Plymouth since the 1950s. You can go visit it today. It's extraordinary. It really makes you appreciate how small and relatively poor the Pilgrims were. The fact that this thing makes it across the Atlantic, both in the original in 1620, but also the replica also sailed with the same technologies the Pilgrims did in 1957 from England to the U.S.
That must have been a bit of a scary trip.
It's extraordinary. The book he wrote is called Project Mayflower, and it's a super interesting story. I don't want to step on the interview too much, but it's first of all, I didn't realize what a attraction this is. They get 2.6 million visitors see the Mayflower II each year, so it's not like a super undersung. But what's interesting to me is that everybody knows the Statue of Liberty, gift from France. Mayflower II, this replica Mayflower, was a gift from England, and there's a whole geopolitical story that I'll let Richard Stone tell in the interview behind it.
Yeah, when I was reading up on this before the episode, I hadn't heard of this story at all. In fact, I didn't actually know there was a replica of the Mayflower in Plymouth because I've never been, but now I'm excited to go.
Well, and I grew up because I grew up right outside New Haven, Connecticut. A visit to Plymouth Plantation wasn't like an every year kind of school trip, but most school children in New England will find their way there. And it's sort of like the.
How long was that on the bus, Kiernan? Was that a couple hours?
A couple hours, yeah. Why do you ask?
No, I like those field trips.
You could probably watch like Toy Story en route. And
it's like when we went to the Baltimore Aquarium. It would be the same sort of
thing. Mystic Aquarium for us, but exactly. Though I will say Mark Twain's house in Hartford, which was only like a 30-minute drive, was much more popular. And Plymouth, it used to be called Plymouth Plantation. The idea is it's like Colonial Williamsburg, where they dress up and they talk like the Pilgrims would have talked and talk about that experience, and they have like live fires and they're like doing things as it would have been done in New England at that time.
Oh, that's so cool.
It's very interesting. It's good. And this interview gets you in the Thanksgiving mood, which was the whole concept. But Ryan, before we jump too far into that, you and I have been deep into 2026 planning for Out of Office podcast.
Yes, we have a lot of great ideas, some really cool interviews, I think, coming up. I know I'm reading a few things right now that I'm excited to feature early next year. And I think we want ideas from
Yeah,
folks. Who do
some
you
of the
want to hear from?
best pods of 2025 were people who took the time to email us at outofofficepod@gmail.com, outofofficepod@gmail.com, or slipped into the DMs on Instagram, which is that at out of office pod as well?
It's OOO
Oh, that's right.
podcast.
Because two marketers were brilliant at aligning these two things. So on Instagram, it's at OOO podcast, and you DM us there. Ryan and I check it there all the time. Or you could place it in reviews. We even get people pitching their ideas in reviews, preferably a 5-star review.
Yeah.
It's been a tiny bit slow on the reviews in the past 4 weeks, so I'd love to get a couple more positive reviews in there, especially before our internet troll Cornhusker55 comes
Yeah.
around.
Well,
I feel like
I think
holiday
this
time
episode
feels like
is,
Cornhusker is going to come for us.
yeah, this episode is Americana, folks. Our conservative listeners should enjoy it. So,
Yeah,
uh,
maybe I should
yeah.
at Cornhusker55 and be like, give the Plymouth episode a run. You're gonna learn. There's a lot of America pride in this Mayflower too. We talk about the Mayflower Compact and how that was, in a way, it was like the first American Constitution. It's very compelling stuff. And you know what? It made me feel like I have a lot to be thankful for this Thanksgiving, Ryan.
I'm thankful for our listeners, Kiernan.
But
And I'm thankful.
what am I, chopped meat? I was going to say I'm thankful for you, Ryan. But yeah, I'm
I'm
thankful
thankful
for
for
the
you too.
listeners too, of
Yeah,
course. Thankful for
yeah.
all the wonderful guests we've had. I'm thankful for Zoom where we record this. I'm thankful for the servers and the podcatchers that put us out into the world. And I'd be especially thankful for some more of those 5-star reviews.
Kieran, I gave us a shout out on the People First, my marketing newsletter this
Wow, tens
week.
of people are going to be very excited about that. If the conversion rate is above 80%, we're going to get 2-3 listeners out of that.
No, actually, Kieran, it was in a little piece that I wrote on the fact that all these politicians are starting podcasts, but nobody is listening. And I'm thankful that we have more listeners than Donald Trump Jr. has for his podcast Triggered with John Jr., than Governor Andy Beshear has for his podcast Kentucky with Andy Beshear. We've got more than Marsha Blackburn, whoever that is. Oh, that's that crazy lady, or that other lady from Tennessee. Yeah. So, I'm thankful for all of our listeners who are not tuning into Jamie Harrison's podcast At Our Table with Jamie Harrison, which averages 1,800 downloads an episode. So there you go, Kiernan.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And I appreciate the shout out. And you know what else I'm thankful for, Ryan? I'm thankful for the interview today with author Richard Stone of Project Mayflower. I think it's time we take off.
Take that, Mayflower. Tell the cabin crew.
Yeah, they had a cabin crew. Sure.
Flight attendants, prepare for takeoff, please.
My guest today is Richard Stone, author of the book Project Mayflower, Building and Sailing a 17th Century Replica. As a lover of obscure history and a great Thanksgiving enthusiast, I'm excited to say, Richard, welcome to Out of Office.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's nice to be here.
So we've had this idea of a Plymouth-based episode. My listeners know I'm a Somerville, Boston area-based guy, and so Plymouth is a place that I grew up going on school trips. And it's on the tourist track, but I don't know that everybody who comes to Boston makes sure that they go take a side trip to Plymouth. And so when I learned about your book and gave it a read, Project Mayflower, I discovered I had seen the Mayflower II, but I realized a lot of people may not know this great attraction in Plymouth. So let's just start there. What is the Mayflower II?
That's a good question. So, most basically, the Mayflower II, it's a square-rigged wooden ship. So what does that mean? See, most sailboats, it's a sailboat. So sailboats have triangular sails, and you pull them up. This has square sails, and you drop down. It's made of wood. Most sailboats are made of fiberglass.
Mm-hmm.
It has no motor of any kind. It's identical to the one that the Pilgrims 400 years ago would have sailed to America, and that's kind of how they came up with that design, but it's identical to that. It was made with tools they would have used 400 years ago. And it's little. So people, when they see it, a lot of people go, wow, is that it?
Right, right.
It's about 25 feet wide, and it's adjacent to Plymouth Rock. So it's a little wooden ship sitting next to Plymouth Rock in Plymouth Harbor, which is about 100 miles, an hour south of Boston.
And I've got to ask you about Plymouth Rock, but just to stick with the Mayflower for a moment, what is the capacity? How many pilgrims actually came over on the original Mayflower, and how many can fit on this scale model?
Great question. So 102 passengers were on the original one. They had a crew of about 30. So let's say there were 135 people on that ship.
Mm-hmm.
When it came over in 1957, there were 33 people on the ship. And the captain at the time, Alan Villiers, he just couldn't imagine how all these people fit in that little boat. But it was 102 people. They had some animals. And of course, it was very crude, no electricity, no plumbing, no nothing. Mm-hmm. But 102 passengers came over on the ship. 102 people on that little boat. So imagine a 2-room apartment, okay, or a large, it's a 100-room, small meeting room, a large dining hall, 100 feet long, 25 feet wide, and put 130 people in there.
Right.
And leave them there with no water, no electricity, none of that stuff. Anyway, that was the voyage over. Oh, and by the way, it was really cold. So figure the windows open and it's November.
And for those who don't know, what year did the Pilgrims come over?
They came over in 1620.
And they came from Plymouth, England, and fittingly, it was they just took that name and applied it to New England.
Right. So let's put it into context. So what is 1620? People are like, it's for me like a date means nothing.
Yeah.
However, I know a lot of people go to church every week, right? So a lot of Americans go into church and they open up the Bible, and it happens to be the King James version of the Bible. Well, guess what? Guess who the king was? King James. And a lot of people read plays by this famous English playwright called William Shakespeare. And one of his plays was inspired by one of the people that was on that boat. His play was called The Tempest. Mm-hmm. So you have Bill Shakespeare, writing plays about people that were on the Mayflower. You had King James, whose Bible is still around the world. So that's the time it was going on. 400 and some odd years ago. Long time.
And who were the Pilgrims? Who were the Puritans looking to leave? Why did they come to New England?
Well, it's kind of a combination of people on the boat. There was one group who were religious, and religious means that they wanted to think about philosophical issues individually as they might think of them. At the time, the king was very restrictive, and you couldn't do that. So many of these people left England. They went to Holland for 10 years before they then set off to America. So half the people on the ship were religious people driven by religious freedom and urges to be able to worship as they wish. The other half were filled up with people that were just merchantmen, people thinking, wow, this is a great place to make a fortune, the new world. I'm going to go over and start over again. So there was, roughly half saints and half sinners. Think of it that way. Which made for an interesting thing when they got to when they finally get there. So they never on this ship. They leave and, it's cold and lousy in the middle of early September. They leave. They don't land until November. They're stuck in this little room with 130 people for 66 days. And guess what? You get pretty antsy by that time. And they really, were on the verge of duking it out with each other.
Yeah.
And they did something pretty remarkable. Before they got off the ship, they said, we're at each other's throats. Before we do this, we need to agree on what's going to happen when our feet touch land. Let's make a compact. Let's agree that we might disagree, but we're going to talk things out. And that, we want to have just and equal laws for the general good. We'd like to have that.
Mm-hmm.
And they put it down on a piece of parchment, and it eventually became known as the Mayflower Compact. So that concept of organizing themselves, just and equal laws, was created on the ship. And by the way, when you visit the ship in Plymouth, that little boat, 20 by 25, the back end of it, there's a room, the chart house, and that's where they think people signed the Mayflower Compact.
Wow. And before we get to the Mayflower II, just one more question on the original Mayflower. How did they get this boat? Did they build it custom for this journey?
No. So their ship, it was an old merchantman. So the Mayflower, there were probably about 20 ships named Mayflower at that time, and it was a standard cargo ship. And for 20 years before it set sail, it was just delivering basically wine and things like that to England from France. It would, who knows, whatever. But it was a commercial cargo ship, and it was pretty old and run down. So these pilgrims and business guys who figured we want to go to a new place to start fresh, they hired the cheapest transportation they could get. So it's an old beat up Chevy to drive across the country. So think about that. Think about you want to go to California and you'd rather go in a new car, but you don't have the money. So you're going to take a beat up old Chevy minivan, jump in it, and head out. And so that's what they did. In fact, they actually had two Chevys, two little minivans. The other one was called the Speedwell. So that minivan, the Speedwell small ship, sprung a leak, had to go back. So the people that were on that now crammed into the Mayflower. Mm-hmm. So you got the minivan with not only its full, and then you took half the passengers from the other minivan, the little ship called Speedwell. So that's
a further connection to Plymouth tourism. There's a great coffee roaster in Plymouth called Speedwell.
That's the reason.
Exactly.
It's remarkable. So it's a pretty interesting that bit of story, but goes way back.
And what happened to the ship after they reached America and disembarked?
So they came. They got here. They finally landed. It's the beginning of winter. They docked. It's sitting in the water. The following spring, it returned. So Captain Christopher Jones and his crew went back to England. So that would have been the spring of 21. It stayed around for a couple more years, and by 1624, it was declared in ruins and sold for scrap. So they just tore it apart to, pay debts and get the wood to build another ship.
Sure. So let's now get into the story of the Mayflower II, this replica that can be visited today in Plymouth. Most people don't know, and you're sort of the first to really tell comprehensively the history behind what was actually a gift to America. And so where did this idea start of creating a new Mayflower?
On the battlefields of North Africa.
Of course.
Oh, actually, it truly did. So there was a young English guy named Warwick Charlton, and he joined the war. So he's British. Britain was in the war before we were. Mm-hmm. So he joins up, goes to Africa. He was a writer, a press guy, a media guy. And he was the press man, on the personal staff of Sir Bernard Montgomery, Monty. So when you think of Patton going to you'll see the movie Patton in North Africa. Well, before Patton beat the Germans, Monty beat the Germans. So they were in a big, anyway, at that point, America sent tanks. It kind of saved Montgomery. After that, this young guy, Charlton, was sent off to Asia, and he worked with another famous general, a guy named Lord Louis Mountbatten, Queen Elizabeth II's Uncle Dickie. And so during that, he saw that America played a pivotal role in defeating the forces of tyranny, Imperial Japan and Nazi Germany. After the war, he now comes back to England, and he's thinking, well, why not the Americans? We would have been in a pickle. They saved our bacon. What has the Brits ever done for America? I mean, look at the French. The French gave America the Statue of Liberty. What have we done? We've given them a briar pipe, maybe a tweed coat. And by the way, what do you give the richest country on earth? America has everything. They can buy anything they want.
Yeah.
I know what I'll do. I'll give them something she can't buy. I'm going to give her a piece of her lost history. Mm-hmm. I'm going to rebuild the Mayflower, just as she was in 1620, and sail her across the Atlantic and give her to America. And that's what he did. So he decided to do that. So this is now in the early 50s. He gets this idea. And at the same time in the U.S., there's a wealthy New Englander named Harry Hornblower. Family was
one of the great names in history, Harry Hornblower.
Harry Hornblower. Well, it's very funny. So when they put the Mayflower II finally launched in England, in Devon.
And what year was that?
They went into the water in 1956. So in 1956, they launched a ship, and they're reading letters from people in the U.S., and one of them is from Hornblower. And of course, the audience breaks into laughter.
Yeah.
They were thinking of Horatio Hornblower, the famous, man from novels who was a heroic sea captain, Horatio Hornblower. They weren't thinking of a wealthy New Englander needing a boat for a museum. But Harry wanted to have a boat. So since childhood, Harry Hornblower had a vision of creating a museum to tell the story of early America. And he was inspired by other museums, Williamsburg down in Virginia and elsewhere. And he wanted to do that. So he started putting this together. He hired a very famous architect, a man named William Baker, to do plans for a second Mayflower, because there were no plans back then. Serendipitously, just by chance, he hears about a guy in England who's also trying to build a replica. And the two of them meet. They decide to join forces, and together they made this thing a reality. But it wasn't a walk in the park, and that alone was quite a story. There were many obstacles along the way.
Well, and it continues on today. I was sharing before we started recording that I grew up going to what was then called Plymouth Plantation. So can you talk about what was Hornblower's original vision and what's still there today for us to visit?
So for what you would have visited, you would have seen the ship, Mayflower II.
Yep.
You would have seen Plymouth Plantation. So Plymouth Plantation is a recreation of a 1627 English colony in Massachusetts. So it has a little wall, a wooden fence around it. You can see crops, see buildings, how they did things. So it describes life as it would have been in the 1620s. And there's an Indian village area where you learn about the Wampanoag, the people that made it possible for the Pilgrims to survive. So you learn both about Native American history, you learn about early American history, and it's at this, and you enter through the Henry Hornblower II Welcome Center. It's still there. So it's as you originally saw it, and as people have been seeing it for the last 50 years, except that it's gotten bigger. The only thing that hasn't gotten bigger is the boat. So Plymouth Plantation, the museum, 5 miles out of town, that has expanded a little bit. It's updated. It's gotten bigger, more elaborate. But the ship itself is not. It has remained unchanged.
And in the recreated town, it's period dress. It's actors and docents trying to evoke what it's like in that town. So it's very. I think the comparison to Williamsburg is probably the closest. It's sort of the New England version of that.
It's the New England version of that, and that was his idea. So you think about a couple of. It's hard to imagine what life was like back then. So the ideal docent, who you'll see at Plymouth, they won't talk about anything in this modern era. It's so you walk through a time capsule and what was going on in England, and they've never heard of televisions. I mean, they don't know anything about it. They're just describing life as it was. They're dressed as they would have been. They're very knowledgeable. And it's in a sense, in the world of AI, it's almost like imagining a person from 400 years ago being reincarnated. They come back, they're here, and so that's what it is. It's supposed to give you a very different perspective on what life may have been like.
Is there the same theatrical element on the boat today?
A little bit, but not as much.
Yeah.
Does it for one thing, it's smaller. So there's not people maybe dressed in nautical gear, but they're merely going to describe to you the history and how the ship works. So you can go below deck, see what it's like below deck. The captain, in the back, and the mast, sails, things like that. to describe those things to you.
For Hornblower's original vision, I'm just curious, where did he make his wealth? What was his biography?
So Harry was the son. His father, grandfather, was the founder of a financial house called Hornblower and Weeks. Hornblower and Weeks, by the mid 1950s, was one of the top financial firms on Wall Street. It eventually evolved into American Express and has gone on to a lot of things. But they were a family in the securities business. And so he went into that business. That was his main job. The museum was his hobby. So what's interesting, Harry wasn't a great writer. So he had this vision of the museum, and he did things. But as I was writing the book, you say, well, let's find out about this person from the past. I mean, Warwick Charlton would write things. Harry was not a writer. So I had the good fortune to speak with his daughter, Patsy. That was great. But the best resource turned out to be the letters he would write to his Harvard classmates every 5 years for what they called the class report. So starting in 1945, every 5 years he would write a lengthy letter that would be in his class report at Harvard.
Yeah.
And so I found out about his dreams for this stuff by reading that. So he was a Wall Street guy in the securities business. He had cranberry bogs, but his hobby, as he liked to say, my hobby gone wild, was Plymouth plantation.
That's this podcast for me, so I understand.
It was the hobby gone wild, and that was him.
And this book for you, I think, is the hobby gone wild. But if we Harvard out too much, my co-host Ryan will never let me forget it. So.
So an interesting thing here. So how did I get involved with this?
Yeah.
For all your listeners, how does anybody decide to dig into more of a topic? They want to know more. So I had done some marketing, some work with Plymouth a few years ago. And in the late teens, the ship had to go to Mystic Seaport and have it totally rebuilt because it was made of wood rots. So in 2019, some folks up there said, Dick, you should go visit this guy named Randall Charlton. He's in Mystic. He'll tell you something about the ship that you may not know. So I drove up to Mystic and I introduced myself to Randall. And I said, so Randall, the people at the Plymouth say you know something about the Mayflower II. What's that? And he said, well, not much. My dad's the one that built it. Gave it to America. I said, yeah, I didn't build this ship. It was a gift of the British government. He said, no, just my dad and a group of vets. They decided to do this to thank his wartime colleagues, comrades in arms, for their sacrifice in World War II. He did it. And I thought, wow, this is unbelievable. This is like the guy that catches the winning pass at the championship game and is never mentioned. You hear the quarterback, the guy that threw the ball, but who caught the ball? And I thought, this is an underdog story. So that's what got me looking into it. And then I discovered that during the course of his endeavor to build this ship, he ran afoul of the British government. How's that possible? So back in the 50s, the U.S. and Britain, and particularly Eisenhower, they started thinking about this concept of soft power, and we need to, get our countries aligned more culturally, because it's harder to keep the peace than war sometimes, than winning a war. And the British Foreign Office had an idea that they were going to strengthen Anglo-American ties by strengthening the bonds with wealthy English people and Americans. Have the elites, the rich guys in both countries, get close. And that was it. Well, of course, Charlton was not that. He was just a commoner, nothing like that. So they did their darndest to dissuade people from supporting his effort. Nonetheless, the ship gets into the water. Harry Hornblower sends a note that people chuckle about. Horatio Hornblower is even here. It's December of 1956. They're thinking, this is great. We've got it made. A month later, though, the world got turned upside down. England, with France, joined with Israel and started a war in the Middle East called the Suez Crisis. They didn't tell Eisenhower, who was in the middle of a campaign running as the peace candidate. Was he pissed? He wanted nothing to do with it. Then a month after that, Russia is looking what's going on with England and France, saying, hey, if they're invading somebody, I'm going to go through with my threat. So Russia invades Ukraine's neighbor. Ukraine, we know about Ukraine. The neighbor Ukraine is Hungary. They went in and brutally crushed the Hungarian Revolution. Whoa, that's not good. The French are watching this and saying, well, we can't trust the Americans. And what's going on? Our only source is to form Europe. Let's make Europe. Let's make the common market, this EU. Mm-hmm. That started a month later. So many things that are affecting us today, one of at least Russia invading a Central European country, using political clout to change a nation's foreign policy, all that was happening in 1957.
While the Mayflower is bobbing, ready for its voyage.
No, the Mayflower was dead in the water. Nothing was going to happen.
Right.
It was dead. You might as well just turn it into fire.
Because the symbol of trying to give this to the U.S. had fallen apart, because now we're at odds over the Suez crisis.
So the U.S. didn't want nothing to do with them. Anyway, tensions got so bad, the Foreign Office finally said, listen, we need to do something to show the world that we're not, that we're still close, the Americans and the Brits. That boat being assembled down in Brixham? Whatever we may have said about it, let's take another look. And they did. Yeah. And remarkably, they got sponsors, the ship got built, it sailed off, and it became the big news story of 1957. And it really was a central element in connecting England and America with their special relationship that to this day, even Trump, a few weeks ago, we went to England and he talked about the special relationship. That bond is the key thing that glues these countries together. So there's more to this ship than just it sitting in the water.
Yeah. Well, it is fascinating, and I think your comparison to the Statue of Liberty is right. It's interesting to me that every American knows the Statue of Liberty was a gift from France to the U.S. as a symbol of friendship and fealty, and it's interesting to me that story is not known. Mayflower II, and I didn't know that story, and I visited it.
Well, no one knew the story. So what's interesting as I was doing this, so I'm writing the book. I'm sitting in a coffee shop around the corner from the Mayflower, describing this to somebody. And as I stand up, a person behind me taps me on the shoulder and says, oh, I couldn't help but overhear you're writing a book on the Mayflower II. I can save you a lot of work. It's all been done. And I said, whoa, who are you? I said, well, my name's Jim Baker. I said, oh, Jim Baker, you're the famous historian for the museum. I've read all your books. He's written a lot of books.
Yeah. I
said, well, let me describe what I've discovered. And anyway, so I sent him the manuscript. He writes me a note back. He said, wow, I had no idea. I have been with that ship since it arrived in 1957. I didn't know. I would be honored to write the foreword to the book.
Right.
And so this book is written by Jim Baker.
That must have been a very satisfying note to receive.
It was great, because there's information in here that you don't know. So what I've also tried to do when I was telling this story is use Charlton as a little bit of as a literary prop. So I would say, so Charlton, as he's just learning more about American history because he wants to give this vote, I would then say what he learned. As he studied, he learned about some guy named Squanto. He learned about our Thanksgiving. He learned about other things. So I tried to weave in his academic journey, learning American history, into this book. So it's a way to tell the story of early America in the context of something that people might normally not expect. It would be a good book for junior high kids. And we're going to see if we can put together a study guide, because there's lots of information that's given out in snippets that could tie you to Thanksgiving, Squanto, the Vietnam War. I mean, one of the things that people don't talk about, the Mayflower II, I'll just go on just for a second. So in 1970 was a year of, there was a Vietnam War going like crazy. It was the 350th anniversary of the Mayflower's landing, and the state of Massachusetts decided to celebrate that. And of course, there was a lot of turmoil going on. Anyway, during the course of that, there was a lot of The American Indian movement was going on. The Mayflower was, in fact, invaded by Native Americans who stormed the ship. That's a story people don't know much about. So there's a lot of history that's quite contemporary in the story.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about Plymouth more broadly, and also just given the timing of the episode, Thanksgiving. The popular conception of Thanksgiving. Did you uncover anything interesting about that history and digging into the Mayflower II specifically, or is there a piece of history or a lens that you would put on how we think about this holiday, given your research?
Yes, and it's that Thanksgiving is about the possibility of what can be done when people of different backgrounds and religions and understandings come together to solve a common problem. So the two of them each had an issue that they needed to deal with that was life-threatening. The Pilgrims arrived at the beginning of winter. They had no idea where they were. They didn't know how to survive. The local inhabitants, the Wampanoag, had just suffered a massive pandemic that had wiped out most of their people. And to the east was another tribe called the Narragansett, who kind of looked at that coastal land thinking, I'd like to have it. And so there was a need for the Wampanoag to have an ally. And the Pilgrims became an ally. And together, they worked successfully for decades before things started to fall apart. But it was an example of what can be done when people of different backgrounds work in unison for a common goal. That's the spirit of Thanksgiving.
That's a wonderful message. And it seems to me that Plymouth in the last, 10, 15 years has started to tell the Native American story alongside the Pilgrim story a little more blatantly.
They have, yes. And in fact, there are 2 rocks in Plymouth, which is kind of interesting.
2 rocks. Let's talk about Plymouth Rock. What are the 2 rocks that are there? And why don't you describe their settings?
Well, the setting, so Plymouth Rock is where history, the legend has the Pilgrim stepping ashore for the first time on this rock in Plymouth. It becomes known as Plymouth Rock. So today it has 1620 chiseled in it. There's a gigantic portico over it, and it's beautiful.
It's very grand, and you walk up to it and you look down and you go, "That's it."
That's it. It's a little bit like this ship. Shouldn't Mayflower be bigger? Why do we put the rock?
Yeah, exactly.
You see the rock, so you know where it is. So that's Plymouth Rock. So the second rock, so the Plymouth Rock and Thanksgiving was made possible because there was a great sachem named Massasoit, who was a great Wampanoag leader. There's a statue of him just above Plymouth Rock looking across the harbor. Beautiful, magnificent statue. Adjacent to him is a smaller rock that has a plaque on it that honors the history of the American Indian and the sacrifices they made that allowed Thanksgiving to continue and for this country to flourish. So there are, in fact, 2 rocks. One is on every map called Plymouth Rock, 1620, and the other one is the Little Rock. It was from 1970.
I think of Plymouth Rock as a little bit like, I grew up Catholic, like pieces of the original cross, where there's so many pieces of the original cross around churches of the world. You could build 30 crosses out of them.
Right.
There's Plymouth Rock. There's a piece of Plymouth Rock at a church in New York. There's a piece of Plymouth Rock in the Congressionalist archives here in Boston. It seems like there's a lot of Plymouth Rocks floating around.
It used to be a bigger rock, and then people would come in.
Yeah, exactly. It used to be bigger. Exactly.
You and I would go visit. I'd go, hey, Kiernan, let's get a bit of the rock. I'd take out a little chisel, and I'd chip off a bit of the rock. Well, over the years, there wasn't much of a rock left. So in 1922, I think that's when it was, or 1920, when they were coming up on a 300th anniversary then, they decided to build this gigantic portico over it, a big monument like you see in Washington to protect it. So people wouldn't find it as easy to chip away at the rock.
And are there any other attractions on a visit to Plymouth you'd recommend?
Absolutely. First of all, they have beautiful beaches, great place to go. So if you're a family, drive over. The beaches are great. You look across the bay to Cape Cod. So when you go to Cape Cod, one of the top tourist destinations in the nation, the beginning of Cape Cod is Plymouth. So you hit the Plymouth and just keep going up and around, and you're at Cape Cod. So it's as a beach city, fabulous. Sailing, fabulous. for history. Just up the steps or up the road from Plymouth Rock is a Pilgrim Hall Museum. So Pilgrim Hall Museum is the oldest portrait museum in the nation. It goes way back. And in it, there's a small model of the Mayflower II, and it's a beautiful, magnificent museum right there. Of course, you can go out of town a little bit. That's Plymouth Patuxet Museums now. If you go a little bit north, you can go to Duxbury and find the Alden Kindred of America, another place where they had, people like related to the Aldens, Priscilla Malden, Alden, Mullins and John Alden. The Mayflower Society of America. There are 30 million Mayflower descendants around the world. And their central society is located in Plymouth, literally just up the hill from the ship adjacent to Massasoit. So you can visit the museum. And of course, there are wonderful shops, nice shopping. It's a great place. And they've changed the outdoors. So if you look at you can go and park there. It's easy. You park your car and you can easily spend 4 or 5 hours walking around doing different things and have a nice meal. Good place to go, but there are lots of things to see.
Yeah, and I personally, the beaches are great. You're right about that. But I personally feel like trying to get there in the fall, I just feel like it's a beautiful way to transition into Thanksgiving when this is most relevant to so many people reflecting on the story.
Yeah, it is, and just thinking of dates. So this is Thanksgiving. That's next week. What happened just a couple of days ago was November 11th. So we think of November 11th as being Veterans Day. Mm-hmm. Right. But November 11th is also the date that the Mayflower Compact was signed. Mm. And the Mayflower Compact has been called the first written American Constitution, right, because of that desire to have just and equal laws. And we know that a few years after that, they signed this document that began We the People. So a year from now, it's going to be 2026, America's 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. The tall ships are coming back to multiple ports in America. And when they get to Boston in July, the Mayflower is going to pull up its anchor, sail up to Boston, and sail in Boston Harbor. You'll see the Mayflower, the USS Constitution, the U.S. Coast Guard, Eagle, and a dozen other magnificent ships from around the world. So in Boston. So if you don't want to go to Plymouth to see the Mayflower II, go to Boston next summer, and you'll be able to see her in full sail in Boston Harbor.
You bet. I assume you're going to be on a big media tour when this is all happening. So we have to meet up in Boston.
Yeah. Well, she's a pretty interesting ship. So just with those tall ships, to give a plug for them.
Yeah.
So America does love tall ships. The cover of my book happens to have an image of the Mayflower II sailing into New York Harbor on July 1st, 1957. And I look at that and I say, well, was that the original Operation Sail? Well, it turns out that prior to it going into New York Harbor, future President John F. Kennedy was so enamored with Mayflower II, he walked on board this ship and stood at the wheel. There's an image of him standing at the ship's wheel. It then goes to, that was in Massachusetts. It then goes down to New York. It's now sitting in New York Harbor on July 4th. What does JFK do? He reads the entire Declaration of Independence on WQXR radio. It's like a 14-minute, it's stunning to hear it. And of course, that's in Boston. A couple of years later, the year that he was assassinated, they decided to regather the tall ships and do more than just the Mayflower. And that became Operation Sail, which then in 1976, we know with the bicentennial. The tall ships are coming back. They begin with this ship in 57. So next year, in Memorial Day, 2026, tall ships will be in New Orleans. They will be there for about a week. Then they're going to sail around to Norfolk, Virginia. They will be there for about a week near Jamestown. After that, they're going to sail up to Baltimore. Star-Spangled Banner, all that history. They'll be there for about a week. Then they're going to come up to New York City. They will be in New York on July 4th, 2026. In addition to all these tall ships, there's going to be the largest gathering of military navies from around the world ever, called an International Naval Review. That's going to take place the same week. And then the week after that, the tall ships will go up to Boston and Mayflower II will join them. So it's going to be an incredible 2 months of tall ships sailing in American history.
That's a great destination bucket list set of places for our listeners to put on for 2026. So I think that's a great place to leave it. So again, the name of the book is Project Mayflower: Building and Sailing a 17th Century Replica. Richard Stone, thank you so much.
Thanks. And I got to put in the plug. It's a hardcover. It's an ebook, and the audio edition will be out by Christmas.
And we are going to. Are you reading the audiobook?
I'm reading the audiobook.
Great. And we will put a link in the show notes to anyone who wants to buy. I think we're going to do bookshop.org, which is the way to buy it from a local bookstore.
Right.
And now it's time for the last stop.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the last stop on this train. Everyone, please leave the train.
All right. Well, here we are on the last stop. I want to say thank you to Richard. Super interesting, right, Rye?
Yeah, super cool. Are you going to take Charlie out to see the Mayflower when it comes up to Boston?
Absolutely, it's a must-have. It's already on the 2026 calendar. I was proud to say something that Richard mentioned directly after I stopped the recording was that the Mayflower II is only making the leg from Plymouth to Boston, so it won't be in New York for July 4th. So I'm glad Boston has something on New York.
Yeah, well, you guys had the Mayflower to begin with, so it's fair. It's a fair trade.
You're right. Well, Ryan, we're here in the last stop. This is the last segment of the show, the final segment of the show. It's why it's called the last stop. It's my favorite segment. It's your favorite segment. It's popularly known as the People's segment, and that feels fitting for Thanksgiving. A time for us to come together and give thanks. I think maybe our last stops should have been giving thanks. That's not what we're doing today, but it's a good idea for next Thanksgiving because you and I each bring one thing. It can be anything. It can be a thought, a prayer, an inkling, an article, a piece of gear. Could be a movie. Could be anything. A recommendation from us to you, but it must meet one criterion. It must inspire the spirit of wanderlust within us, even during the workaday week. So, Ryan, I'm going to ask you, as I ask you every episode, do you have a last stop this week?
I do have a last stop this week. Kiernan, I finally did my DNA. Have you ever done your DNA?
Now, what do you mean you did your DNA? What's that?
I did. I sent my DNA into Ancestry.com, and they.
Listen, I know you. Your DNA has been spread all over the world.
Yeah. No. So
I'm not cutting that, by the way.
Yeah. You don't have to. It's fair. No, I think I got my DNA done, and
Sure.
and I sent it into Ancestry. I'm 1% Azakanazi, which is super cool, and I think I'm going to lean into. No, but not any real surprises.
You mean Ashkenazi.
Yes. Well, I'm still learning.
Sure, you're only 1%. You're gonna have to master that before you head to the synagogue.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think it wasn't super surprising. I'm very Irish and English, Welsh, German.
It's exciting to find. It's exciting to find that you've got some Jewish heritage.
I'm trying to figure out where it is. It does have this thing called. It gives you these thing called traits, which tells you what you're likely to have. So I'm likely less naturally athletic.
Oh my God! Wait, what? That's so crazy.
Yeah,
that's weird eugenic stuff.
Yeah. It says I'm likely motivated by success. I'm unlikely to have dimples. I do have dimples.
Okay, this is where it gets it's getting kind of horoscopy.
It's weird.
It sounds pretty lame.
I thought it was sort of horoscopy. But what is cool, and I do want to call out, is there's two different things they do that are fun. They have this thing called the ancestral regions, which breaks down a map of where your family is from, and I can see that that 1% comes from sort of the Czechoslovakian, Polish sort of region, and then they have this other thing where they built out these ancestral journeys, where it tells a broader story of where it tells sort of a broader story of the migrants that your family was a part of. So I can read about this wave of settlers who came to Delaware and the Chesapeake Bay from Germany that my dad's family is a part of. And it goes through the timeline of kind of why they went, what was happening there, and that I think is really fun. And I hope they kind of continue to build out this sort of like bigger picture narrative. So we have things like supporting the revolution, 1775, talking about Maryland's role. And then it calls out two different people in my family tree that are linked to this story directly. So I think it's a fun way to like bring this history to life and kind of imagine, I found out I've always wanted to know if I had family that fought in the revolution. And I know that I had a great grandfather who was a Quaker, and he had to he got thrown out of the family because he wanted to go fight in the Pennsylvania militia.
Good golly.
And they were Quakers.
Wow.
They didn't believe in the war.
Yeah, I was just about to, but the Quakers
wild?
are such peaceniks. That's crazy.
I know. Well, you can imagine being like a 19-year-old in Pennsylvania and your friends are going off to fight the British and your dad's like, you can't fight, and
I'd be like, okay, thank you. I would, famously a coward.
Me too, probably. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see that spirit in you.
No. But I'm glad that I had,
Did the horoscope area say, likely cowardice?
There was funny stuff in it in the horoscope area where it said it was like less likely to be athletic, but more likely to be a fast runner. And I'm like, wait a minute, what does that mean?
Oh yeah, this sounds like
I'm a
some
non-athletic
AI shit.
Yeah.
It's really bad.
No, but I think the origin stuff is much classier than that, and you can get in detail on people in your family. So I think that's sort of hopefully where they're headed, and not into this eugenicsy trait section. But I did find that I have a lot of 6 cousins in Seaford, Delaware. So I don't know what I'm going to do with that information. Did you bring a lot of stuff for us this week?
I did, of course. I've got a great and interesting article from the New Yorker. It's from a couple months back. I'm catching up on back issues. And it's called Greenwood Cemetery's Living Dead by Paige Williams. And Greenwood Cemetery is one of the great cemeteries to visit in New York City. And it's the article, as New York articles do, does a deep dive in what it takes to run a historic cemetery, to preserve the legacy of those that are there, but also how the cemetery has they've basically tried to build a viable business by doing things like staging theatricals inside or music events inside the cemetery, because they have this beautiful landscape in addition to being a burial place. And it was just like a very interesting, there's a philosophical argument of like, should this be a place where you do modern day events alongside the dead? You and I were obsessed with the Day of the Dead. That's one of the things that I like about the Day of the Dead, is that it's not somber, that it is a celebration. And to hear Greenwood Cemetery in New York doing it really was very interesting to me. So I thought this would be a fun thing to try to take in if they've got anything going on while you're visiting New York.
Yeah, I love Greenwood Cemetery. I spent so much time there during the pandemic.
Did you ever see the parakeets? That's the other big thing to see.
Yeah, there. I've definitely been to the parakeets, the ones that are hanging out and they live like in the in that big what is it?
It's like a gateway,
the entrance, the grand entrance, right?
So for anyone who doesn't know, these green and yellow parakeets, like classic parakeet, there is a population of them that live very weirdly all year in this giant communal nest that's built in one of the like spires at the entrance of Greenwood, and you can go and you can see them. There's tours that are offered by local birders, or you could just go up and see them. And they're believed to have escaped from a crate at JFK in the 1960s. They're native to South America, but this population is able to survive and thrive right in New York City through the winters. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it is definitely something to see, and Greenwood is beautiful. There's so many interesting folks from New York history buried there, and we've talked about this a million times on like the Olmsted episode, but graveyards, public parks came about because people were hanging out in graveyards and having picnics and stuff, and they were like, hey, maybe we could have a place that's not just for the dead, where people can do that. So. I think it's fine that people go in and think and experience the past in this way.
So, if you've got a favorite historic graveyard you want to hear us talk about next year, make sure outofofficepod@gmail.com or Instagram @OOO podcast. A little different between the two handles, but we believe that you are an intellectual and curious listener, and you can keep two things in your head at one time. And until we hear from you,
I'm Ryan Davis.
And I'm Kiernan Schmidt.
And this is Out of Office, a travel podcast.
This seat taken. Think you would have survived the Mayflower journey?
Yeah, but I would have died shortly after when they told me I had to start farming.
You're famously not that athletic.
Yeah.